The radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 91, recorded on Friday, June 2nd from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And happy Pride Month, everyone.
Yay, we're corporate sellouts.
Woo! I think I'm going to go to Pride Fest this weekend. Are you going to Pride Fest at all?
I hadn't planned on it, but I don't go to any of our
I don't have a
festivals.
social life, so take
Yeah,
that.
I'm a shut-in. It's always quarantine for me.
And on today's episode, we're going to talk about Uganda's barbaric anti-homosexuality act. But first, the headlines.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Let's start things off in Texas. The Republican-led Texas House has impeached State Attorney General Ken Paxton.
The guy famous for
So many
suing the
bad
federal
things.
government constantly to try to block any legislation put forth by Joe Biden.
Wasn't this also the same guy that said the others should die for their country for COVID?
That was,
Or was
Dan
that-
Patrick,
that was
the
Dan
lieutenant
Pat-
governor.
Sorry, wrong crazy guy from Texas.
Wrong, horrible politician from Texas. The House General Investigating Committee laid out 20 articles of impeachment against Paxton. We have a quote from Ken Paxton. The ugly spectacle in the Texas House today confirmed the The ugly spectacle in the Texas House today confirmed the outrageous impeachment plot against me was never meant to be fair or just. It was a politically motivated sham from the beginning. Woo-wee!
Okay, Ken, calm down there. Go. Turn your anger onto the Cowboys or something like that.
And then
Yeah,
he
because of
said
course-
the Rassin Frassin rabbit. I don't know what's...
Because, of course, the hyper-conservative Republican
It's all-
Texas House.
Right. It's all political motivation. The woke
Texas House.
Republicans.
So what did he exactly get impeached for?
So in the 20 articles of impeachment...
20 articles?
Some are related to, and I did not know this before we looked this up. Some of the articles are related to Paxton's 2015 felony securities fraud federal indictment, for which he has yet to stand trial.
What?
So from 2015 until now, and I looked it up, it's this whole thing where there's a dispute about the pay for the special prosecutors that were involved, and it's been going on for years, obviously, and this trial just keeps getting pushed back. It was supposed to be in 2017 originally.
And it's still going on?
Yeah, and in this time, Paxton has been elected and reelected twice
Oh my God.
while awaiting trial for federal securities fraud. He's accused of persuading investors to buy stock in a technology firm without disclosing that he would be compensated for it.
Oh, great.
He's also not licensed with the state to be soliciting for this company either, which he had to pay a fine for.
No way.
But most of the allegations are related to Paxton's relationship with Nate Paul, who is an Austin real estate investor.
It's okay. How come always the bad guys are the real estate people? Every
Because
single
they're
time.
all bad people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Paul, who contributed $25,000 to Paxton's 2018 campaign, was being investigated by the FBI in 2020 when he asked Paxton to intervene in that probe.
Oh, there you go. There's the good stuff.
According to the House-hired investigators,
The super woke Republican investigators.
Paxton circumvented his own agency's policy to hire an outside attorney to intervene and issue subpoenas to benefit Paul.
Wow.
Investigators also found that Paxton forced his staff to rewrite an opinion on COVID-19 restrictions to benefit Paul.
Wow. Great.
I'm surprised that they had to rewrite an opinion on COVID-19 restrictions in Texas in the first place.
No kidding. Because the first step was probably just let them all die.
Right. Ooh.
Spread the virus for Jesus.
Pray the COVID away.
Right. Yeah. The first guys were just thoughts and prayers.
They had to change it so, also Nate Paul's businesses can still remain open, specifically. he is immune to COVID and everything he touches is safe. So this still obviously will go to a trial.
At some point?
Yeah, hopefully it's a lot sooner than the federal trial that he's still awaiting. But if you're wondering what might happen, well, we know one person who apparently has a vote in this trial, Texas State Senator Angela Paxton, who is the wife of Ken Paxton.
Oh, dear.
Unless she decides to recuse herself. Which, why would she? So that should be fun. But just the fact that, I mean, he was impeached with a heavy Republican majority kind of goes to show that...
what's going to actually happen.
Yeah, that he's probably not going to do very well in this impeachment vote either.
I can.
Yeah, they'll just get someone worse.
Yep.
Hopefully less criminal. Hopefully. I know with the modern Republican Party, it seems like that's what they embrace.
No kidding.
And I mean, they elected him and reelected him twice, knowing that he was awaiting trial. So
hey, that's good news for Trump at least.
Yeah, but it's all a political witch hunt. And I don't know if you saw, someone took some video while this was going on, while this impeachment process was happening.
Okay. Outside
of the Attorney General's office, outside of the State House, with a literal dumpster full of papers on fire. And I don't know what the context of that was. It could be just benign, but it was kind of funny. It kind of looked suspect for sure.
Nice.
Next, let's move to Washington and talk about the debt limit deal that was reached.
We have officially reached a deal between Biden and McCarthy, and the world's economic status is safe until 2025.
I've been saying all along that they were going to cut a deal. They're not going to basically tank the stock market because both parties are ultimately beholden to all of those corporations and the shareholders and all of the investments that are tied in with that. Yeah, they can say that they're going to play chicken, but both sides were going to pull the wheel away well before they came close to colliding on this issue. And I don't know. I think it was more of a media thing that was blown up like, oh, this is going to happen. We're going to tank the economy over this when it's just bluster. And it's designed to do exactly this, to force some kind of concessions with these budget reconciliations, which it's just stupid. And we should have gotten rid of it back when Democrats had full control.
Right.
Which, again, how many times can we say that they should have done this?
But they didn't.
And they never do.
Yep.
And now everyone's praising Biden. He's such a great negotiator when he didn't need to get in this position
to begin with
at all.
Well, and we can talk about, let's talk about what's in the deal first. The bill cuts so-called non-defense discretionary spending, which includes domestic law enforcement, forest management, scientific research, education, and more for the 2024 fiscal year. It would also limit all discretionary spending to 1% growth in 2025. It would also immediately rescind $1.38 billion from the IRS and ultimately repurpose another $20 billion from the $80 billion it received through the Inflation Reduction Act. Officials suggested the IRS might simply pull forward some of the money earmarked for later years, then return to Congress later to ask for more money.
And this is the dumbest thing, right?
Of course it is.
And this gives lie to everything the Republicans are talking about with this strategy. Their whole thing is, fiscal responsibility. Let's think of the debt. Think of the children. Oh, my God. And meanwhile, whenever there's a Republican president, the debt raises by more than there is when there's a Democrat, because when there's a Democrat president, they cry about spending. When there's a Republican president, they let him do whatever he wants. Trump tax cuts, $10 trillion. Who cares?
Right. Well, and this was also part of the Biden administration's messaging plan in their arguments over the negotiations anyway, because where you have Biden complaining about how Republicans are always talking about our spending side of the debt, right? We always hear about this, we're spending too much money. Government spends too much money. And that's a very tactful way of doing it because the average voter they believe that the government spends too much money, whether they know about it or not.
And as we all know, the deficit is fake. We owe the money to ourselves. It really doesn't matter. We can have as much debt as we possibly can. It does not matter. But the problem with pulling this funding back from the IRS is it actually makes money for the government.
Well, that's the whole point. That's what the Biden administration was trying to make, is that we need to look at the revenue side of the debt, where if we're constantly cutting taxes and cutting the department that's supposed supposed to help get those taxes and get those revenues, then what are we doing?
And why do the Republicans care so much about getting rid of this IRS spending? Because the IRS is going after wealthy people and corporations and catching them cheating on their taxes.
Yep.
And that's why every dollar spent in the IRS gets you $2 back. And no, they are not going to audit you and ruin your life, average citizen, because I don't know about you, Joe. I don't cheat on my taxes because I don't really have enough money to do that in the first place.
Right.
It's only people that are extremely wealthy that have all of these loopholes and hire all of these tax attorneys to cheat the system and not pay any taxes. As we've seen, even so far as Donald Trump not paying any taxes when his taxes were leaked.
So you are 100% correct with this entire take, because you cannot have a fiscally responsible party anymore when you're trying to actively gut and defund the department that's actually trying to make the country money at the end of the day. And it's not even like actually making money. We're not scamming the people. It's literally just the department that collects the money.
Right. They are the Internal Revenue Service.
Right. So you're just trying to cause chaos and, like you said, allow more crimes and more fraud to happen.
Because those are the Republican donors.
So stupid, man. Let's keep going. The bill also imposes new work requirements for food stamps on adults ages 50 to 54 who don't have children living in their home.
Because currently the work requirements was up to 49.
Correct.
And now they've been expanded to 54. So, you're 50 years old, you're on food stamps, your life's not real great to begin with. And now you will have work requirements.
Yep.
And it's hard enough finding a job at that age to begin with, because who wants to hire somebody that's going to be retiring shortly and is usually discriminated against based on their age? Now you're going to have to file more paperwork and be much more of a hassle in order to collect the benefits. And you've probably paid into the system for 30 years.
Correct. It would also exempt veterans, the homeless, and people who are children in foster care from food stamp work requirements.
Which means overall, yes, we're going to be having a chunk of people falling off 50 to 54 that can't keep up with the paperwork.
And it will hurt a good chunk of the population.
Right. But then because we're dropping the work requirements on veterans, homeless, veterans should never have any requirements for benefits. Like, that's stupid.
It's kind of the whole point of trying to take care of the veterans. And we shouldn't have to tell the Republicans that, because they only did that because the Biden administration called them out.
Right.
On their initial drafts of this bill and said, hey, the Republicans are literally trying to attack and disrupt veteran lives. And they had to figure out, no, we're not, we promise. And they just quickly scribble it all out. Veterans are okay.
So overall, this is probably neutral, where it won't actually, in the end, accomplish anything.
No.
Other than kick some older Americans off of the food stamps that they probably need to live.
Right.
Standard Republican stuff.
The agreement also includes new measures to get energy projects approved more quickly by creating a lead agency to oversee reviews and require that they are completed in 1 or 2 years.
Why don't we have that same requirement for immigration? Because
those are people we don't like.
Yeah, instead of the current system, which is like people
10 to 20 years?
been here for most of their lives, their children were born here, and they're still waiting.
And now they're adults.
Yeah, and you see, this is a Joe Manchin thing. He added an automatic approval in this bill to permitting requests for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, a natural gas project in West Virginia. The wording...
Of course he has to get his little cut in.
Yep. The wording from the bill is the timely completion of construction and operation of the Mountain Valley Pipeline is required in the national interest.
Okay, Joe. Get out of here.
The national interest, which is why you have a senator from a small state pushing for it.
We got 2 more for you. One, it puts an end to the freeze of student loan prepayments by the end of August and restricts the ability to reinstate a moratorium on tuition.
And this is a loss for Republicans who wanted the student debt loan forgiveness completely taken out.
Don't tell them that, because they're still trying to brag that this is a victory.
I mean, and it might still happen in the courts anyway. The courts might strike that down. So maybe they're just hedging their bets on that will happen, but they wanted that taken out completely be in this bill, and instead all it does is put a freeze on the moratorium, which Biden said he was going to do anyway.
Yep, by the end of summer. So good job, Kevin. You're what's the Trump book called?
Art of the Deal.
Yeah, you really read the Art of the Deal there. I'm super proud of you. And lastly, it pulls back $30 billion in unspent COVID relief money. Some of that money will be repurposed to boost non-defense discretionary spending. So
it goes right back into other programs.
Woo!
It does keep two important things. One, the next-gen vaccine development. So again, we're still funding the pharmaceutical companies who will then charge us an exorbitant amount for the vaccines that they develop on government funds. Those funds will still go to the pharmaceutical companies. For all of you out there that own stock in those companies, you'll be happy about that. And also
calling all Pfizer bros.
And also it does still keep a government program in place that helps pay for vaccines for uninsured. So that is, I guess, positive.
So when I read some analysis about this, there was, specifically with this COVID relief money, there was talk about how Biden did a great job at, these are their words, not mine. Biden did a great job in negotiating because he gave up symbolic victories for maintaining real substantive progress. What are your thoughts on that?
So we read the original House bill for this debt ceiling budget, I don't know, it's probably a couple months ago, right after we came back.
Probably.
And they wanted way more.
Yes, they did.
They wanted a much longer spending freeze. I think they were asking for 10 years, which was crazy. And they wanted all of the green energy stuff taken out, where, none of that really, we didn't get any more put in, which is what Biden was pushing for, was for more of the green energy funding to be put into this bill, which obviously he wasn't going to get that. But overall, it's not a great deal for Republicans. It's not really a great deal for Democrats either.
No.
Whereas they did have to give it. I'm mostly upset about the work requirements because it's just stupid and it just creates more bureaucracy from a party that complains about bureaucracy constantly. They sure love it when it comes to trying to deny benefits to people.
Correct.
But also, the IRS stuff I really don't like. And there's rumors about there's kind of a lot of side deals that were struck in this. And as we even mentioned with the IRS stuff, they got all of that $80 billion right up front. So they can push, instead of having it be for later years, it's kind of like the opposite of how teams always do with the signing bonuses, where they push everything back and then they eventually cut the player before they ever earn any of that money.
Sure.
It's kind of like that, except they want to pull all that money forward to now and spend it. And with the idea that if Democrats are ever in control of Congress later on, they can go back and say, hey, can you get rid of these things that were agreed to by Kevin McCarthy and get their funding back, which is a possibility, hopefully. That is just completely showing you who the Republicans are really fighting for in Congress, and it's the wealthy tax cheats in this country. Those are their donors. That's who they care about. That's who they're fighting the hardest for and have been pushing for ever since that $80 billion in funding went through. And I just don't see how anyone can believe the lie that it's, the real problem is the IRS are going after the average citizen. No, they're not. I've never once in my life been scared of the IRS.
Yeah, how many times have you been audited in your life? And that's the thing too. I hate that, and I hate also people praising this as look at this great deal, look at this amazing deal. I would be the first one to say I think this is a win for the White House and for Joe Biden. I think that is a legitimate, in the position that they were in, where you had a lame duck government, you gotta take some crap.
Well, insofar as they put themselves in this position.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. And then we can talk about all that stuff in this other part too, because even with all that said, it's okay to say this is still a crap deal. This will do way more harm for a lot of things and for many millions of Americans, and it's going to hurt a lot of people. And for what? So Republicans can take some symbolic victories. So I'm perfectly fine with saying that this was a very crap deal. I'm okay with the Democrats who voted no on it, taking the little moral stance that it had that didn't affect anything. I'm okay with that as well.
Right, which that was obviously calculated. They knew what the vote counts were.
But, and I got into a debate about this with my friend over this week about it, where you have people saying, well, this is how governance should be done. It should be all about meeting in the middle and finding compromise. This isn't respectable compromise. These are just a bunch of clowns who are trying to just hurt millions of Americans for no reason. And then another side, which is the Biden administration, Democrats, who are saying that's really stupid. Why are you doing that? So why are we trying to compromise with these idiots who are literally just trying to destroy our government? It just drives me insane. So
and the entire idea of us potentially defaulting on our loans and destroying the economy is such a dumb thing to constantly have hanging over our heads.
Yes. So why is this and I heard a debate between Ezra Klein and another, I can't remember what the guest was, but she was like a libertarian who's in favor of the debt ceiling because it helps promote more compromise and discussion about the debt. I'm like, that's nonsense. You are playing with fire.
And it never seems to work out that way when Republicans are in charge.
No.
Because Democrats don't play this game.
Well, because they feel the moral obligation to not destroy the entire world economy. And I'm so sick of the coverage kind of being shown as, oh, the Republicans want this and the Democrats want that. And they just can't seem to meet in the middle.
Oh, and especially like with this, it's like, no, these are things that already passed, that already went through all of the forms of government, you know, that we say, well, this fosters compromise so we actually get things done. All this did is undo stuff that was already done.
Yep.
So if your whole thing is we need a government that actually accomplishes things, this is doing the opposite of that.
Yep, quite literally. So it's a crap deal. I'm still happy it passed. I'm glad we avoided global catastrophe by not shooting ourselves in the foot, but still a crap deal.
Not Stuart Rhodesing our eye out.
Stuart Rhodes shot his eye out while he was trying to give a gun safety lesson. I'm just going to keep reminding people of that forever.
So let's move on from a potentially collapsed economy to a partially collapsed apartment building in Davenport, Iowa.
Teach me about this. I actually didn't know about this story until you wrote about it.
All right. So this happened on Sunday. It was a building that had been in severe disrepair before it partially collapsed. Just looking at the videos of before this building collapsed, I thought, oh, I clicked on the wrong video. This building is already completely fallen apart. Nope, that's what it looked like before. There had been dozens of complaints from residents, fines from the fire marshal and city inspectors. City inspectors complained they could never get access to the building. There had been like over 100 interactions between the city and the building's owner, and the guy had only owned the building for like 2 years.
Jesus.
He spent $4 million buying the thing. Of course, it belongs to an LLC because he's a real estate douche, like we already mentioned. They are all terrible. Let's kill them all.
Oh, Jesus.
Metaphorically speaking.
In Minecraft.
There had been multiple inspections by the city that all warned that this building was literally crumbling. Visually, you could see it. There were layers of bricks coming off the building, and multiple metal poles were bracing the side of the building that collapsed.
What?
Documents released Wednesday night show the city officials and the building's owner were warned for months that parts of the building were unstable. And these were from the city inspectors. They were hired to look at this building. They all came back with dire reports telling them, you need to get everybody out of there. You need to do something. This building is going to collapse.
Okay.
But a February 8th letter to the city from the engineering company Select Structural, who was hired by the owner of the building, said that an engineer conducted an emergency site visit on February 2nd and determined the crumbling wall is not an imminent threat to the building or its residents, but structural repairs will be necessary. So the city took that report, not its own inspectors that were saying that, and they had even their own inspectors out there after this in March and in May that said, no, this building is falling down soon. They believed the company that was hired by the owner had obviously an interest in not losing his $4 million investment that he had just bought, like I said, 2 years ago in 2021. So they believed that report.
Oh my God. God.
over the multiple inspections that said otherwise. And in fact, the city's chief building official, Trishna Pradhan, resigned earlier this week in the aftermath of the collapse. Pradhan had visited the building on May 25th and erroneously reported it had passed an inspection in notes in the city's online permitting system. And Pradhan had tried to change the status of that inspection after it collapsed.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure by resigning, they keep all of their benefits and everything from the city versus being fired. So I'm sure that's why they resigned. Also, oddly, there was a rush to demolish the building less than 48 hours after the collapse. They stopped the search initially less than 24 hours after the collapse, with people still missing.
Oh my God.
Protesters gathered outside of the building demanding that demolition wait until after a thorough search of the building was complete, as residents were missing and believed to be in the building. Then a woman was seen in a window of the building that had to be, I think she had to have her leg amputated.
Holy crap.
To get her out of there, and she was evacuated. At this time, there are still 5 people unaccounted for, with 2 believed to be in the rubble. So probably 2 that are dead, 3 that they're not sure if they were in the building to begin with or not. I know they did finally, even though they were going to tear it down on Tuesday, 3 days ago, they did finally conclude the search efforts today, and I believe they're going through now with cadaver dogs to see if they could find any of the bodies of any of these people. So they don't believe anyone is still alive in there anymore. But I don't know why they were such a rush to tear down this building immediately. It would have been torn down 3 days ago had they not seen that woman in there. And people knew that there were still people in the building who were chanting. Protesters chanting outside, search for these people. There were family members of the people there pleading.
Oh my God.
And there were reports that the mayor had some connection to a development company that was involved in this, but I couldn't find anything that said whether or not that was true. So I didn't include that in there, but there were those reports.
I'm just watching this video cam footage of the building. My God. And you can see the poles are just holding it up.
And bricks just pouring off of this thing before it collapsed. And I mean, this just shows, why are we talking about this on our program? This is a mostly black, poor area. This building was generally low-income families. There were apparently reports that a lot of homeless people used some of these apartments that had been essentially condemned. There were apartments that, because of all the complaints, because they didn't have water or electricity, were not allowed to be rented out.
Sure.
There are reports that homeless people were squatting in those apartments, things like that. And so these are people that the city does not care about. What they care about is the real estate investor who bought the building for $4 million and probably is paying a lot of money to local city officials, either, through their election campaigns or permitting, things like that. That's who they care about. So that's the person that they were accommodating by believing his inspection report that he paid for, versus all of the other city inspectors telling them that this building was incredibly dangerous and that it was probably going to collapse soon. They did not care because they didn't care about these people. Now, if this was the other collapse that we had in Florida, the ritzy condo area, I imagine if it was this bad, the city probably would have stepped in. But in that one, that was the actual residents of the condo that were irresponsible and didn't listen to the reports that they were getting because it was going to cost a lot of money to fix and they didn't want to. Kind of the same thing where the owner of this building didn't want to make the repairs either.
Sure.
And then the residents were unfortunately just caught in this, whereas in the condo, it was the residents who were also ignoring the inspections. But yeah, this just shows that this city of Davenport, Iowa, did not care about these people at all. And that is a big problem. And instead, they were focused on where the money was coming from, which is really the biggest issue of our government in the United States, of capitalism in general. And at least probably 2 people, at least, are dead now because of this, because we value money and making a profit on your real estate investment more than we do the health and safety of the people in this country.
Yikes, man. This is oof.
Because very clearly this building building should have been condemned. I mean, yes, watch any of the videos, look at any of the footage, any of the photos. Like I said, it doesn't really look that much worse after it partially collapsed than it did beforehand. And people have been complaining, all the businesses in the area were complaining about this building too, because bricks and trash and things were constantly falling off of it. The other side of the building had some of the facade bricks had fallen onto the sidewalk outside. And I think the building owner, after the collapse, got a $300 fine.
And last but not least, YouTube will no longer be taking down false claims about the U.S. elections. In a recent blog post, YouTube said that they are reversing their decision from 2.5 years earlier that will stop reviewing content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches occurred in the 2020 and other past U.S. presidential elections. And it says it was carefully deliberated in their decision.
I'm sure that will change again after they get sued by someone, Dominion or somebody like that, after there's 8,000 videos.
Well, okay, let's read a couple of things from this blog post. First off, the reason why they did that, quote, in the current environment, we find that while removing this content does curb some misinformation.
Yeah, it should be stop right there. Like,
no
okay,
kidding, period. End of story, done. It could also have the unintended effect of curtailing political speech without meaningfully reducing the risk of violence or other real-world harm.
Political speech. So making things up is political speech now?
Well, so that's the thing that just drives me nuts. So I'm also going to read this other one really quick and we can start talking about this. Quote, the ability to openly debate political ideas, even those that are controversial or based on disproven assumptions, is a core to a functioning democratic society, especially in the midst of an election season.
It's not though, right?
This is literally
debunked misinformation is not core to a functioning society.
This is literal proof. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind right now. The spread of misinformation on Facebook about the 2020 election is what led to the biggest attack we had on our own soil's capital. What are we talking about anymore? We all know that January 6th happened and it was all because of misinformation that spread like wildfire on social media platforms like YouTube. And it's insane too because I'm reading a book called The Chaos Machine, which is basically all about how social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have just destroyed human psyche and have been a gigantic blight on our democratic systems, not just in the US, but throughout the entire world. Mm-hmm. Misinformation is one of the biggest drivers in polarization and conspiratorial thinking all over the place.
The dictator in Turkey, Erdogan, just bullied free speech warrior Elon Musk into basically censoring content in Turkey on Twitter.
And in that book, Jason, the guy, Max Fisher, it's a great book. I highly recommend everyone read it, by the way, goes into grave detail about how much Silicon Valley execs and like higher ups have this weird Ayn Randian libertarian style of free speech that everyone should be able to have speech, no matter what happens and what's the cost. And it's killing us. It is destroying our democracy brick by brick. And now we can see it literally being destroyed brick by brick.
Everyone should have free speech unless they're going to lose $1. Then hold on.
This is an awful decision by YouTube. Nearly all of the evidence and research on this topic, even those from YouTube and Facebook, have shown that misinformation propagates hard, which leads to worse outcomes. We talked about other things where conspiracy theories all kind of boil down to like a small but very vocal group of people. I think back to like the vaccine misinformation could be boiled down on Facebook to like 12 accounts. It was like 70% of vaccine misinformation can be boiled down to those. That's what happens on YouTube all the time. Mm-hmm. You get people who get sucked into these rabbit holes.
That's why Alex Jones was banned from YouTube.
Literally. And you don't see them going back on that crap. This is all just because Donald Trump is running for election again, and they don't want to have to deal with any type of backlash for not allowing a presidential candidate to spread more misinformation conspiracy theories.
Right, because any speech that he gives, he's going to say that the election was stolen and that it was rigged.
That's what he's done on every campaign stop so far.
Yes. He just had one in Iowa, which we're not going to talk about. I'm sorry.
Well, because it's the same thing over and over again. It's gibberish.
Yeah, and his hair looked awful. Even more awful than normal. His comb over was not styled properly.
And what drives me nuts is, if you thought it was good enough at the time to have this policy in place, why would you think, oh, enough time has passed, we're fine, we can go back to now spreading all that for whatever's sake?
Right.
I don't even understand that logic.
Yeah, it was a lie 2 years ago, but now it's okay.
Well, it's kind of like saying, oh, well, I know the volcano erupted a couple of years ago. I'm sure nothing will battle happen again. Let's just stay and live there forever now. It'll never erupt again.
Well, and it's while we're moving into another presidential election. Like, this would be the time that if you had let this policy lapse previously, now would be the time to reinstate it.
When you literally know democracy's on the decline in the country because of these type of conspiracy theories. Shame on you, YouTube.
And Google,
and
who
Google,
runs
yeah.
YouTube.
Man, you cannot trust these companies to do the right thing.
They're
ever.
all leftist Marxists, though. I don't understand.
Oh my God, I cannot. I hate them all. I hate them all. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of it. Just hate them all, man.
Burn it down. Burn it down.
But it's like digital, so like delete it. Delete.
Metaphorically.
M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, they've won.
Boy ain't right.
For Fox in the Head, we're going to bring back our favorite contributor to this segment, angry little elf man, Ben Shapiro. He's an angry, angry boy.
And because it's June and Pride Month, we had to have a Pride-themed Fox in the Head segment for you. Because, of course, conservatives get triggered by literally everything and have the dumbest takes possible.
So Ben Shapiro is arguing, and this is from the May 31st edition of the Daily Wire. He is arguing that stores celebrating Pride Month, which is, as we've talked about, just a marketing thing to make money, is somehow a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act and is a quote, corporate oligopoly because multiple stores are celebrating Pride. It's a conspiracy. It's somehow price fixing. I'm not sure where he's getting that leap from. Having Pride displays in your store is anti-competitive, and not just it makes him angry. It makes him a very angry little boy. But yes, this is insane. He first starts talking about Bud Light and how that was successful.
Well, and I was just going to say that too. Let's start with that. How they are still praising these boycotts over the dumbest crap possible.
The anti-cancel culture.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. These are the anti-cancel culture crowds who will not shut the hell up about trying to bankrupt large companies, which, again, we're not fans of either, over the stupidest crap. He even says in this diatribe about how Bud Light's boycott's working because we clearly went back to Coors Light now because everyone hates Bud Light now, and because they're pushing Dylan Mulvaney. Dude, they did one Instagram post. And you haven't shut up about it in like 2 months.
At least. And he says, quote, "What happens when you're talking about a universal wave of companies all mirroring the Pride Month celebratory morality? What happens when that happens? How do you fight that? The answer here is going to be a bevy of lawsuits. This is going to be legislation and lawsuits. Because what we are watching right now is illegal collusion between these companies."
Illegal collusion?
Yeah.
Ben, dude was a lawyer. Dude went to Harvard. Are you kidding me right now? Oh, Ben.
And again, I mean, I could destroy his lawsuit in a single sentence. What about holidays?
Yes.
Is celebrating Christmas a corporate, what is that word again?
Oligopoly.
Oligopoly? Is it anti-competitive that you can't go into a store from the end of October until January without seeing a Christmas display? Is that collusion? Is that a violation of the Sherman Act?
How about when all of the companies change their logos to red, white, and blue to celebrate the 4th of July?
We should sue.
Like, what is that? Is that a violation of the Sherman Act? You don't even have to go into holidays, Jason. Let's just make a different group of people. How about veterans in our military, for example? Is it an oligopoly when I hear about veterans in military all day long in these commercials who are literally just using them just to make more profits and sales over people who just want to scream freedom all day long?
According to Ben Shapiro, yes. So this is maybe the dumbest thing we've had from Ben Shapiro, which is
and that's a high bar. That is a high bar
thing to accomplish. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he would even entertain this, because it's so easily beaten back. It's so simple to come up with any defense for this. Oh, it's anti-competitive that these companies are all promoting Pride during Pride Month.
which doesn't affect their competition at all.
They don't all raise their prices during this time. If they did, then maybe you would have a case. Everything rainbow colored increases in pricing around this time.
Well, that's the crazy part. He brings up examples in the video where he talks about, well, there was this lawyer group in DC who refused to represent these particular groups of people unless the city paid more money. And the courts found that this was a type of price fixing.
Because it is.
Yes! Yes!
But it has nothing to do with displays in stores.
No, you freaking moron. And just because you have PlayStation and Xbox changing their logos on Facebook to rainbows doesn't mean that they're still trying to compete with each other anymore. They're somehow colluding in any way, saying, oh, we're going to have some massive conspiracy of the gaming consoles or whatever garbage you want to say. Just because you have Target and Walmart changing their logos on Facebook and Twitter to rainbows, that doesn't mean they're trying to not compete anymore.
Yeah, this one is terrible. Like, what's with all these pastel colors in the spring?
Well, and did you notice that when in his little segment, we'll put in the show notes for you, it's 3 minutes long, because we're not going to subject you to the entirety of the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro show.
A lot of angry reading of the text of the Sherman Act.
Right. But did you notice how he clearly had nothing to go off once he read the Sherman Act? And we were talking about, like, as he was describing it.
Yeah, that doesn't match.
He had nothing that applied to the situation. And then he immediately started moving on to climate change and ESG and saying that, climate change initiatives may be a form of collusion. We're not talking about climate change. We're talking about pride stuff.
Right, because a lot of times I could see an argument for climate change in a certain avenue, which is exactly what he was talking about, because companies can charge extra,
Yes.
because there can be additional fees put on for climate change initiatives, and then add extra. Nobody's putting a charge because they've got a Pride Month celebration display.
It's
in the
the
store.
gay markup or something. You kidding me? Come on.
So another bad argument from the person that makes a lot of them.
Oh, I was just saying, from the America's smartest conservative.
Right. The New York Times declares is the cool kids philosopher.
Oh, God. He's so dumb. He is so stupid. Oh.
I don't think he believes this argument at all.
No,
It's
he
just-
doesn't, because you saw in the middle of his point, he changed subjects to try to make it work. He doesn't.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
Let's move on to our main topic of the day. We are going to talk about some legislation that was just passed in the African country of Uganda, the Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023. And this is actually a bill that's very similar to one that was passed in 2013, which was also the Anti-Homosexuality Act that had the same exact name, but then was overturned in the Ugandan courts.
Correct.
The following year. So this is kind of just a rehash of that bill. This one goes a little bit further, unfortunately. Let's talk about what's actually in it. It prescribes a life sentence for, quote, committing homosexuality, which it would define as a homosexual act. It also prescribes the death penalty for, quote, aggravated homosexuality. And you may have seen online, if you've seen anybody talking about this, everyone just says, well, aggravated homosexuality is pedophilia. So that's fine then. Which one, there's not the death penalty for
I was just going to say.
heterosexual pedophilia, which would be a problem. Like, why is homosexual pedophilia somehow worse? It's all pedophilia. It should all be illegal. I don't think we should have the death penalty anyway, because we get things wrong.
And it's stupid.
But it is not just that. It is not just that at all. People that are trying to push that narrative are lying to you. They're misleading you on purpose. Oh, well, you defend pedophiles? What's wrong with you? It's because it's not even close to the only thing that is referred to as aggravated homosexuality. And we'll give you the list here. Transmission of HIV through same-sex relations. So they say any terminal illness, and that would carry the death penalty. And there's also any homosexuality on children, obviously, and disabled people. They specifically lay out both mentally disabled, which it doesn't say like any threshold at all, just any mental disability counts. So I guess if you have ADHD, if anyone engages in homosexual sex with you, they could get the death penalty. And also physical disability, again, does not give a threshold. It does have have separate spots for people that are unconscious or intoxicated, things like that. So it's not like the same thing that they're getting at. Those are separate listings under aggravated homosexuality. There is also serial offenders. So if you've already gotten convicted of homosexuality, which it was already illegal in Uganda before, it's just this law makes the penalties much stricter, then you can be put to death. So completely not anything to do with children, consenting adults. If you are considered a serial offender, you can be put to death. So full stop. Anyone who's saying that it is just for pedophilia is wrong. They either didn't read it at all, or they did and they're lying. Also, anyone deemed to be in a position of authority over their sexual partner, death penalty. Anyone committing homosexuality with someone over 75, death penalty. Any sexual acts deemed to be done through misrepresentation or intimidation, death penalty. That is not just, it just has the death penalty for pedophilia. It's not even close. So to push that, and we'll see an already admitted liar pushing that narrative later on, but that is what the bill said. I looked at the text of the bill. We'll link the text to the bill. It's in English. You can see it for yourself. Also carries a 20-year prison term for, quote, promoting homosexuality. So any LGBT activists in Uganda, many of them have already fled the country and have become refugees because of this law.
And I remember in our show notes, we'll have it as well, but there was that PBS NewsHour segment, and I don't know if you watched or you just read it.
I read the transcript.
Okay. There was another clip of an LGBTQ activist, not the main one they talked to. So not the guy, but there was a woman as well.
I kind of saw her interview a little bit.
Yeah.
It was posted on a different...
And she basically broke down on camera who said exactly what you just said, which is basically...
Yeah, how did I become a refugee in my own country?
Yeah. And where do we go?
Yeah, because that's it. Like, where are they supposed to go? And you can also get, if it's not crazy enough, you can also get up to 7 years in prison if you are a landlord who rents to someone who is LGBTQ. Just renting an apartment or a house to someone who is gay can get you thrown in jail for 7 years.
Dude, that's so disgusting, man.
Same-sex marriage is also outlawed in Uganda, and this new law says that you can get up to 10 years in prison if you organize or attend a same-sex marriage. Just if you attend a marriage, you can get thrown in prison for up to 10 years.
And now this bill was passed, and obviously it was signed into law, but it was passed with nearly unanimous.
Right. In the Ugandan parliament.
Yeah. And this was not the first attempt to do this recently, because the original bill was actually vetoed by the Ugandan president, Museveni. And that one was even crazier than this one, because it also just criticized if you just simply identified as LGBTQ as well. So even if you just said you're LGBTQ, you're going straight to jail. Like straight up Nazi shit. But that got vetoed, so everything's fine now, right?
Well, I guess it might be appropriate to compare it to the Nazis, because just like this law and these ideas about homosexuality, the Nazi ideas of eugenics, both came from the United States. And that is why we're talking about a law that was passed in an African country on a mostly U.S.-focused podcast. Because really, as most horrible things done in the world, at least in the last 200 years, the United States is responsible for this law.
And actually, it was your idea to briefly discuss this when we had the idea to talk about this law.
I would feel dishonest if we did not bring up the idea that I knew that this was linked to the United States because of a 2013 documentary from Roger Ross Williams entitled God Loves Uganda. And oddly enough, even though I knew of this documentary and even own it, I have it on DVD at home here, I have never seen it.
You are a bad podcaster. You told me to go watch it. We'll talk about it anyway. I'll talk about it then, you jerk.
You did watch it today.
I did watch it. And I will say, like, it's an older movie. It's 10 years old now. Very relevant, as if, like, nothing has changed. And it will make you very angry. It's extremely well done. You know, it's along those same types of movies that was touted around during the early 2010s, like Jesus Camp. I don't know if you saw that one or not.
Yeah.
It was basically one of those that was spread around a lot. I highly recommend watching this if you can take it, because it's very revealing how involved the United States evangelicals are in these horrible laws that are happening in Uganda, in the persecution of LGBTQ people in Uganda.
And they're specifically targeting African countries to push this anti-homosexual agenda and pushing for these types of laws to be enacted.
Correct. And just a very, very quick discussion and breakdown. The movie centers around this evangelical megachurch, which I don't know if you remember because it's probably been a long time since you've seen it, Jason. I actually happened to rewatch it like a year or two ago, Jesus Camp. There was a guy in Jesus Camp who just basically came in as an abortion specialist and like would showed all the kids those little fetus figurines. I don't know if you remember picturing that.
I've certainly seen them enough in the different protests.
Well, I'm talking about the
everything.
guy.
Yeah, I don't remember
he looks,
much from that.
Imagine.
I just remember the kids, the messed up kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine super rapey pastor from South Dakota that you'll envision him.
Any pastor from South Dakota.
Right.
Yeah. A Catholic pastor from South Dakota.
His ministry is actually the focus of this movie, God Loves Uganda. And it's called IHOP, the International House of Prayer. Because of course it is. And it shows this troop of missionaries that end up going to Uganda, and they're the cringiest group of white people you'll ever see in your entire lives. And they just go to Uganda and try to spread the gospel. And it's disgusting. It shows how evangelical groups have pushed very extreme ideas, not just about LGBTQ people, but about sex and abstinence-only programs.
All of the things that are horrible failures here in the United States,
right,
exporting to Africa.
Quite literally, the whole stereotype of don't use condoms to prevent HIV and AIDS, because apparently it's all a lie according to them. It's very bad. And God
will protect you.
I had a couple of quotes I just found were interesting. This one was from a Ugandan church member who said, "I believe people in Kansas City are not going to joke. They're not going to play games. People go to Kansas City for prayer." And I thought that was just amusing. Because you have these...
They go to Kansas City for barbecue.
I was like, you have these jokesters coming from Kansas City, Missouri, who are just these horrible people who have nothing to their lives except for this lie that they're going to spread to people. And they're convincing legitimately innocent victims in Uganda to believe this crap. And then I had another quote from a Ugandan pastor who said, "Some of the foreign aid workers think abstinence is George Bush's big joke from Texas," because this was back in George Bush era.
And Texas is, of course, the entire United States.
But the message is, I know you can abstain. And then you'd see other vivid imagery of signs just lining the roads about how you should say no to homosexuality, how you should never use a condom, and that you need to be abstinence only to protect your value as a human being, and that you should be a virgin because that's what's best for you. It's very draconian, archaic stuff. It's very scary. And even when because they also go into the first attempt a decade ago of when they had tried to pass the anti-LGBTQ law.
Documentary was from 2013,
right?
So followed right along with that.
And when that was happening, there was even a newspaper that just straight up put out a hit list: 100 pictures of Uganda's top homos. So cool stuff, right?
So how do they know they're tops? But I think the real message, I know you can abstain. Just look at all of the states that have abstinence-only education and what their teen pregnancy rates are.
Right, exactly.
And that's how you know that you can't abstain.
And it's just gross. You see how these evangelical right-wing groups are just pouring money into these developing nations, trying to get their message out in the most toxic...
Hate, and that message is hate.
Yes, quite literally. There are other pastors who are not... Actually, they got excommunicated from Uganda because their lives were at risk. And that's exactly what they said. They said, you have these Americans that will come in and they just brainwash my friends and family into hating people. It's really gross. I'll let you get back to the present.
And in that PBS NewsHour segment that we talked about, the main interview is with Stephen Kabuye.
I think it's Kabuye.
Hey, look at that. Like I said, I just read the transcript. So, who is the co-founder of Truth LGBTQ. And he obviously calls out the Ugandan president and all of the legislators, all of the members of parliament who passed the law. But he also specifically calls out foreigners who helped push this law through, including Sharon Slater of Family Watch International. And that's who I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about, because I think that's the most influential group when it comes to this legislation that just passed.
Well, it was kind of funny because when I was doing research for this, I went on their website and the first thing they had was just in a big red button saying, "Get the facts about Uganda." So I clicked on it, and they had a delightful little FAQ section about their involvement in this heinous law in Uganda. Also, I just want to quickly reiterate, the Family Watch International is a designated SBLC anti-LGBTQ hate group.
Very much so.
So keep that in mind.
One of many in the United States.
So what role was Family Watch, this is for their own words, by the way, what role was Family Watch International playing in the April 2023 Interparliamentary Conference in Uganda to pass this law? First, it was primarily to brief African parliamentarians on the harms of comprehensive sexuality education, CSE, which is negatively impacting African children. We have an entire website dedicated to exposing the harms of CSE. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because screw that.
So sex education is bad, actually.
Literally. And they have and I did go check all this out. They have grading like rubrics to do this stuff. And they found stuff like how, children at young as age of 10 are learning about bestiality and necrophilia and urophilia and coprophilia and all this other weird stuff. And that's just so horribly that we're sexualizing these children.
And it's probably just like a list of different types of...
It's literally a list of different types.
Right. That's probably what it is, right? It's in a textbook. So it's probably talking about different, for lack of a better word, sexual deviancies or whatever, and probably just lists different things to educate children that those types of things exist so that they can better identify if they're being abused.
Well, I'll give you an even better continuation of that. Here's their response to what you just said. CSE advocates deceptively claim and convince governments that CSE is the answer to all the ills in the world: teen pregnancy, STIs, HIV, human rights violations, gender inequality, gender-based violence, and even global warming. Yet governments and parents are rarely shown the full curriculum, which sexualizes even the youngest of children and promotes sexual rights and sexual pleasure at the expense of sexual health.
This sounds so much like modern U.S. evangelicals talking about trans rights advocacy and why we need to ban any talk of trans or gay. Like, this reads like a Ron DeSantis law in Florida,
doesn't it?
So, I mean, it's not surprising that this is our new export from the United States. And you didn't respond to what I said at all, honestly. I was very, very political of you. But yes, sexual education is the cure for STIs, including HIV.
Because like you just literally said, all the research and data has shown, even in the United States.
I mean, gender-based violence, I don't know what that is. It certainly it helps identify sexual violence for kids that don't even understand what sexuality is and they're being molested.
I think that is probably what they're going for. It's probably like sexual assault and rape.
Right. And it's like, yes, that is true. And that's why you need to talk to your kids about this type of thing, is if they don't have any concept of what sexuality even is, they can be exploited without knowing that that's what's going on.
Well, and my favorite part about that specifically, how you said, I don't know what gender-based violence is, and we think that's what it is, right? But the reason why they say gender-based violence is because they are already insinuating that it's men doing the violence against women, right?
Well, it is. I mean, it would be most of the time.
But that's my point, is because we talked about this, was it last week when we talked about masculinity? Is that these are the people who are pushing that men have the rights over the women in their lives and have ownership to do whatever they want to them. These are the people who are causing the problems for gender-based violence to begin with. And I don't know where they got global warming from.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like overpopulation, maybe? But
there were no citations in this thing, so I have no idea.
It is, and I know this is coming, it is pseudoscience. It is just someone who is essentially a preacher starting from the idea that any talk of sex or sexuality to children
is
bad. Polluting them, right? It's like the whole Apple thing. Knowledge is sin.
Yeah.
And you are basically leading these children to sin by giving them knowledge.
Right.
And they start from there, and then they try to work backwards. And what else can we come up with, and how can we justify this? And it's a bunch of nonsense.
Well, and I think what concerns me a little bit too is that, so their claim was that children as young as 10 years old are viewing this type of content.
That's a fifth grader.
And that's
not not like a little tiny kid.
So that's what I was going to say is, first and foremost, the curriculum, because I read the freaking rubric they had, which was insane. The curriculum that they were doing was targeted at 10 to 20-year-olds. So
right.
That's
so you just say 10. You keep saying 10.
Right.
Even though that's at the lowest. But like I went to a Catholic grade school and we had sex ed class when I was in 6th grade.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
So
too. Like, first and foremost, that's already
right
not that
there.
bad.
Yeah.
Right. And second, you have to talk about this stuff by like high school when you're like 14. I think I had more prominent sex ed stuff when I was in 8th grade. So probably 13, 12? Mm-hmm. Because that's when they're already having thoughts to do this to begin with.
Right.
You're not sexualizing children. You're keeping them safe for what's happening as they are growing older and becoming adult people.
Right. You generally, in my, and I mean, I don't have kids, I don't know, but in my opinion, I think you want to get this done before puberty so that they know what to expect.
Yes.
Not, well, let's just wait until they're married and they can figure it out, that is
what they do.
Christian method.
Yep.
And prescription is you can figure it out on your wedding night. And that's just dumb. That is literally a recipe for teenage pregnancy. And that is exactly what the statistics and all the numbers and reality shows you.
Correct. So what else was Family Watch International doing by their own words? The second reason for our participation in the Uganda Interparliamentary Conference was to raise awareness on the harms of the pending ACP, which is Atlantic, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, EU Partnership, which is European Union, Agreement, and the Eastern Southern Africa Commitment on CSE.
Sex education.
Yes. Through these and other initiatives, Western governments and UN agencies are pushing highly controversial graphic sexuality education and, quote, sexual and reproductive health services for children without parental consent. The reason why I brought this one up as well is because there's actually a very well laid out theme in the movie where you have American evangelicals pushing this extremist message to Africans, and specifically Ugandans in this case, to the point where they start discrediting their own countries and their own Western values, because then you all of a sudden see Ugandans kind of absorbing it, saying, oh, all these foreign Western civilizations are trying to push their ideals onto us, and becomes a very nationalistic type of mindset that's actually pushed onto them by the same foreigners.
Right. Like we're gonna oppose this colonial effort by covering ourselves in the blood of Jesus Christ. Traditional African values like Jesus. Like what?
I mean, literally.
You know who gave you that, right? That also came from the colonial and imperial powers. And well, I guess must have been fortunate that they had the right God, right?
Well, and that's the thing about it. Is that literally you had
what were the odds?
You had the Ugandan president Museveni during a press conference after he signed this bill into law, congratulating the parliament for not kowtowing to the imperialist nations going against them. Like, they're the ones who gave you this idea in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I want to make that very clear, is that this weird nationalist rhetoric that Ugandans have was literally pushed onto them by American white people. Mm-hmm. It's insane.
I actually have a quote from Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni following the conference. He said, "Africa should provide the lead to save the world from this degeneration and decadence, which is really very dangerous for humanity. If people of opposite sex stop appreciating one another..."
Appreciating?
Yeah, he means screwing. "Then how will the human race be propagated?" Which I have heard so many times from Christians here in the United States. How can you have any life from homosexual relationships? And the answer to that is, one, who cares? Like, there's plenty of straight people, right? So it's fine.
But Jason, how could you have a marriage that has any meaning at all if you don't have children?
I don't know. You might have to ask my wife. But yeah, I mean, that's the, like, if everyone's gay, then the human race will just die out. Well, I guess, but not everybody's gay, so I guess that doesn't really matter, right? It's less than 20% of the population generally.
Well, and that's the weird part too.
We'll still be fine.
They think it's like a virus where like you're gonna get turned gay. I'm like, what are you talking? Are you gay?
I thought it was a choice. What the heck?
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And also, I just want to throw out there the, quote, sexual and reproductive health services are literally like HIV services and giving out condoms to prevent more spreading of HIV. So I just want to make that very clear.
Diseases and
yes.
early pregnancies and everything else that happens.
So that's what this group is against. So I just want to put that out there. And you're not going to believe this. After all of that we just read you from their own website.
Right, and they're the ones clearly pushing
what's going on?
Anti-gay sentiment.
All throughout the country.
Throughout the continent.
Right. But we're supposedly, I'm just focusing on Uganda.
Well,
right now. But
yes.
If
you look at Family Watch International's website, they say specifically that they target Africa.
Yes.
So it's not just Uganda, it's Ghana and all of these other that are all also, by the way, writing up legislation that is mirroring this new horrible law in Uganda. So you're going to see this propagating
all
in
throughout
other African countries.
Yes. You're not going to believe this, but Family Watch International actually opposes the anti-LGBTQ law that just passed in Uganda.
And this is such a theater opposition.
I can't wait to read this to you. I cannot wait. Are you ready? Quote, as stated in many of our materials, Family Watch opposes harassment of or violence against all persons regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Therefore, Family Watch opposes the Uganda anti-homosexuality law. Family Watch opposes legislation that penalizes a person for having same-sex sexual attractions or for their gender identity. Family Watch opposes the death penalty or harsh penalties in the context of Uganda's pending law and other similar bills. Further, Family Watch opposes provisions that penalize people for failing to report on another person's sexual activity, whether heterosexual or homosexual. Way to freaking backtrack.
Right. After pushing this and having this, attending this conference and everything else, and just constantly harping that God hates gays, God hates gays. You want to get good with God, you got to hate the gays. And then when the consequence of that comes, like, okay, we're going to lead the way in hating the gays by making it illegal and killing them, which is kind of what the Bible prescribes, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, what did you do?
Well, and that's where it makes me very angry, because number one, at its worst, they're lying, right?
Yeah, this is just...
I mean, and we know that's what
yeah.
it is, because...
They can't say, like, yes, we hope they kill them all, which is what they really want to say.
Right. So let's be clear, is that they are lying. They absolutely want gay people to be killed. But even at its best, let's say for this point, they had full intention. It's like the, what is it? Hate the sin, but love the sinner crap that Christians like to pull. Okay, Jason, I'm going to say this just like we did for another example. If our podcast led to groups of people being sent the death penalty to, I think we should reconsider what we're saying in our podcast. And this reminded me of a couple that got interviewed in the God Loves Uganda movie. It was a missionary couple, and they're cringy and dorky as hell, whatever. But they were interviewed about the missionaries' involvement in Uganda pushing the anti-LGBTQ law, a decade ago. And they said that it was, quote, Western media misinterpreting what was actually happening in Uganda. See, there's the Western media doesn't know what's actually going on here. They're just trying to push their values onto us here in Uganda, which is so bizarre. Because they came from there.
Like, this is, again, like such a conservative talking point.
Right.
It's the media.
I know. And then they went on to say how they had no idea what was even in the bill, and that the church plays no part in pushing for those laws. And then, of course, then they go on to condemn LGBTQ people as living against God's will in general anyway. And that's what infuriates me about both Family Watch's and this couple's line of logic, is that they cop out so freaking hard when they'll say when blood can be on their hands and they know it. They're like, well, we didn't do anything. It's not our fault. We weren't actually doing anything wrong. And I'm so sick of that playing stupid when people's lives are on the line crap. We see this stuff all the time where you have the right wing or the conservatives of whatever country will influence people to do crazy terrorist level crap and then say, well, I mean, you can't actually say we influenced anybody. We literally saw this with January 6th, right? This is a good example of that. And they'll just pretend that their words do not have consequences. And it drives me freaking nuts. And also, I just want to say for the Family Watch stuff that they literally copped out in their next section of their own FAQ section, where they say, quote, Family Watch has not taken a policy position on the decriminalization or criminalization of homosexuality.
Yeah, I thought you just said it was bad.
Rather, we have promoted the rights of nations to determine their own laws with regard to sexual issues in the line with their own religious and cultural values. So, nations' rights. Am I right?
in line with their own religious and cultural values, which we tell them what they are.
Well, and even though
our interpretation of the Bible.
We talked about it before.
That we give to them.
Right. But we talked about before where the conservative argument of states' rights is actually a complete cop-out in saying that it's a racist dog whistle. That's exactly what's happening here, except this is like an anti-gay dog whistle, I guess you could say.
And then they complain about the Southern Poverty Law Center, calling them a hate group, which I'm sorry, they promote hate. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. That's what they do.
Yep.
You are a hate group.
Yep.
You push hate. You hate a specific group of people. That's the only thing you do. I don't need a separate third-party entity to tell me that, but that is what you do. So, complain about that all you want.
And I put this in just for you.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, the SPLC states that the founder, Sharon Slater, promotes pseudoscience, anti-LGBT pseudoscience. And they say, oh, that's a cheap shot because it means you can't debate on the merits of an argument. There are no merits to your argument. That's exactly what I said before when they talk about depopulation coming as a result of homosexuality. That is pseudoscientific because if you look at the science, that's not true. It just cannot happen.
Right.
And the idea that gays commit more crimes, sexual crimes, they spread more disease, again, all of those things are unscientific. If you want to say unscientific instead of pseudoscientific, that's fine, but that's what it is. It's not based in reality, just like everything to do with religion, and is completely made up based on a book that you read once.
Also, I love the fact that they said that we're not...
Maybe you read it.
I love the fact that they said that they're not a religious organization and they just promote evidence-based policies that have proven to lead to the best outcomes for men.
Right, and I love they always adopt everything that real
actual academics say.
Right, like evidence-based. Like they just adopt that. They don't know what evidence-based means.
No.
They just know that that's what smart people say when they're attacking them, so they adopt that language.
Right. And this also kind of reminds me of that one meme about ad hominem attacks where they say, like, what's the difference between an ad hominem versus non-ad hominem? And this, like, one side of the picture says, your argument is wrong because you are a moron. And, like, that's an ad hominem. And then the second part is, like, not an ad hominem. Your argument is wrong because of all of this.
And you're a moron.
And you're a moron. That's exactly what that whole, like, are we actually pseudoscience? Well, not really, because that's what they say when you can't actually have a good argument against us. No, it's just because you're idiots who don't understand the actual evidence and data that go all against your position.
Well, and you don't care because your entire position is based on what
religion
you consider to be sin and immorality.
Right.
Which is, informed by your religion.
But they're not a religious organization.
Right. They're not a religious. They just speak the truth.
So that's just one group. We also talked about from the God Loves Uganda movie that there are many groups like the International House of Prayer.
Pancakes are so much better than prayer.
But there are tons of right-wing Christian groups that are pouring millions and millions of dollars all over the world, but especially in Africa, to propagate this bullshit. There's a really cool investigative article that we'll link in the show notes that showed that since 2008, right-wing Christian groups have spent over $280 million around the world pushing for anti-LGBTQ laws. 54 million of those dollars went straight to African countries like Uganda. So you can really get this scope of how big the impact of right-wing Christian Americans are doing to these different nations all around the world. It's really gross and it's extremely damaging.
And I kind of want to finish up by just talking about a very unlikely politician that spoke up against this law in Uganda a couple days ago. On May 29th,
we're going to pause and let you guess.
You'll never guess. The senator from Texas.
You mean Cancun?
Raphael Ted Cruz tweeted, "This Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality is grotesque and an abomination. All civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse. Hashtag LGBTQ."
So I don't know.
Wow. From Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Like, it is really Ted Cruz. I double checked.
I don't know what BTS stan somehow it hacked into Ted Cruz's Twitter and just went nuts and tried to give the most outrageous non-Ted Cruz take.
And the only thing I've heard is like some kind of explanation is like he's not polling very well right now, and this may be a way to try to garner more moderate support in Texas.
I love it.
And of course, as you might expect, he was quickly attacked by the right as going woke.
Welcome to the resistance, Ted.
Former Trump senior counsel and advisor Jenna Ellis responded to him by saying, "You can condemn a law that imposes the death penalty for homosexuality without being pro or hashtag LGBTQ. Like Bud Light." And they cannot stop talking about Bud Light.
I'm telling you, man, it was one Instagram post.
You should have just said nothing, not this. And then she also responded to her own because she was getting lit up by other people in the comments. "For the commenters, I stand with Uganda on this because the definition of aggravated homosexuality, subject to the death penalty, is raping children."
Which we talked about. It's way more than that.
And yeah, that's one thing of like 20. Why would Cruz be against this anyway? And what does this have to do with hashtag LGBTQ? Absolutely stupid comment. And let me remind you again, she is a lawyer. And apparently she either, like I said, didn't read the bill at all, which is in English and is not that long, or knows about it and lied, which there's some precedent for that. She was actually recently censured by a judge in Colorado for lying 10 times about the 2020 election results. So I'm just going to say, based on precedents, that she is lying about the bill on purpose, knowingly and purposefully lying about what is in the bill, because she is a liar for a living. It's her job. And there was also a response from, I swear this is his name, Tom Askell. And I'm being as generous as I can on that pronunciation.
Is it a hard C?
I'm going to say it's a hard C because otherwise I don't have to bleep it out. But it's an appropriate last name for this guy. He is a Florida pastor who wrote the invocation for Ron DeSantis' second inauguration. And his response to Ted Cruz: "Tell it to God, Ted." And then he puts in a quote from the Bible: "If a man lies with a man as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them." From Leviticus.
Leviticus.
Right. It's like there's all sorts of problems with that, from like
banning shellfish and
and not wearing
fabrics.
Not trimming the edge of your beard, and lots of things that we don't care about that are all in there too, but whatever.
I feel like this is the only law, or the only verse from Leviticus that I've only seen Christians quote from.
Right.
Like you never hear any other Leviticus besides 2013.
And he goes on to say, "Was this law God gave to his old covenant people horrific and wrong?"
Oh, you're so close, Tom. You're so close.
The answer
to it.
Is yes. Like, yes, it is. It was, it is, it always will be. Yes.
If your holy book is telling you, sorry, let me rephrase that. If your holy book on morality is telling you to kill people for doing nothing wrong other than being who they are, then yes, it's a horrific and wrong book.
And yes, it is. It 100% is. So is this guy advocating for the death penalty in the U.S.?
Sure sounds like it.
Not according to him, of course. But yes, if he's going to be consistent in his religion and he believes that to be the word of God, then how can you not advocate for that?
But that's exactly what I was talking about earlier, where you have people like Jenna Ellis and Tom Asshole. Which I think is funny because isn't that like an actual like pejorative, an asshole? Like the just asking questions types. Anyway, you have people like Jenna and Tom who will say horrible rhetoric and then push right up to the line of saying we want gay people murdered. As soon as they get called out for it, they'll throw their hands up there and say, well, I wasn't calling for people like to actually do violence against anybody. Your rhetoric is directly influencing violence and terrorism against groups of people all around the world. And I'm so sick of people trying to excuse that by saying, oh, freedom of speech. You're getting people freaking killed, man.
And one defense you might see quite often when it comes to this is Uganda is not the only country that criminalizes or even has the death penalty for
what's so bad about it?
Why are Americans and the West attacking Uganda, but they don't talk about other countries when it comes to this? Why is that fine? They're able to make their own laws, but not an African country, right? And they make it like almost like a racist thing that we're criticizing an African country for trying to have their own laws and rule their own people, their own sovereignty.
Yeah.
Well, the answer to that is yes, the United States should push against those other countries. And
not the other way around.
We should not push back against Uganda. Yes, every one of those, and the fact that one of them is Saudi Arabia, and that they're on the UN Human Rights Council is just an affront to humanity and should be put a stop to. And yes, the only reason we don't say anything to them is because they have oil. That's all valid criticism, but it just means we should push back against them.
Yes,
and not that we shouldn't push back against Uganda.
I completely agree.
And in fact, there are, according to the Human Rights Watch, 67 countries that criminalize same-sex relationships, 9 countries that criminalize gender expression. One of them would be the United States if a Republican becomes president. And Uganda is actually the first non-Islamic country, so not based on Sharia, to have a death penalty for homosexuality. The other 10 countries are Afghanistan, after the United States left, Brunei, Iran, Mauritania, which I did not know was a country. It's another African country. Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. So the United States should be pushing all of these countries to change their law and restricting aid until they do so, which it's unfortunate the only thing restricting aid generally is going to do is hurt the people of the country. We're already hurting because of these laws, but there really is no other leverage that you have because the UN is toothless. And like I said, Saudi Arabia is on the UN Human Rights Council.
Right.
So that's useless. So yes, we should be pushing back. And yes, the United States should criticize human rights are human rights. They're not United States rights. They're not Texas rights. It's the same reason why we push back against this idea that states can restrict abortion, because it's a human right to be able to decide if and when you give birth. It is not something that a state should be able to decide. It's the same thing with slavery. You don't let states decide if slavery is legal or not, because it is a human right.
Correct.
And it is the same thing if you should be able to express yourself and love who you want to love, as long as there's consent, no matter if that's someone of the opposite sex, same sex, other, whatever, that you should never fear for your freedom or your life.
Correct. And I will give the Biden administration some benefit of the doubt because, number one, you had Biden already put out a press release and statement that said this was a horrific and absolutely terrible thing to have happened, which was an absolutely human rights violation. So he at least said something, which is good. And he did say that there will be sanctions and economic sanctions forthcoming. So I also understand the very thin line you have to walk when it comes to countries that you have consistently given aid to and immediately putting sanctions upon them, because you will have people who rely on that foreign aid to live and better their lives, which is something we all want to do. And it's a legitimate, difficult issue where you have to weigh the lives of the people that you're taking money away from and increasing the suffering upon citizens of those countries, but then at the same time not endorsing this absolutely heinous behavior. So the good news is that something will probably happen to Uganda. Will it be enough to actually do anything? No.
And this is very likely to spread to other African countries.
Absolutely.
Ghana in particular has said that they have a law that's written that's waiting to go through their parliament, and it was, of course, pushed by a Christian group.
So note that this Pride Month, you still have LGBTQ people running for their literal lives.
Yeah, fighting for their right to exist.
And never forget that that's happening still today. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively.
So there's the Octoroks that are there. If you drop your weapon, it'll actually not only fix it to like put it back to 100% condition, but also give it an upgrade.
Oh.
And every time I use it, if I forget that Tulin is like
He
still
just
out,
one-shots
yeah,
it.
he kills the thing. And I'm like, no, what are you doing?